The crystalline cities of the Zephyrian Collective sparkled like diamonds against the dark canvas of space. For 3,000 years, these magnificent structures had floated in perfect harmony across 7 star systems in the Andromeda sector. Their towers reached toward the stars, connected by bridges of pure light that pulsed with the rhythm of advanced civilization. Commander Veltar stood on the observation deck of the primary command station, his 4 golden eyes reflecting the distant glow of what had once been the Kepler system. Now, where planets had orbited peacefully for billions of years, there was only emptiness. The Devourer had arrived like a nightmare made real, its massive form stretching across space like a living shadow with countless dark tendrils reaching out to consume everything in its path. The entity moved with terrifying purpose. It did not simply destroy worlds, it erased them completely, as if they had never existed at all. Stars winked out of existence, planets vanished without a trace, and entire civilizations disappeared into the growing void that followed in the creature's wake. "Sir, we have lost contact with the Meridian Fleet," reported Lieutenant Kirazan, her voice shaking despite her years of military training. Her blue skin had turned pale with fear, and her hands trembled as she worked the communication. "Consul, that makes 5 fleets we have lost this cycle." Veltar's 4 eyes dimmed with despair. 5 fleets meant 50,000 ships and over 2 million lives, all gone without a trace. The Meridian Fleet had been their finest, equipped with the most advanced weapons the Collective had ever created. They had gravity disruptors that could bend space itself, quantum torpedoes that could phase through any known defense, and reality scramblers that could alter the basic laws of physics in small areas. None of it had mattered. The Devourer had swept through their forces like they were nothing more than dust in the wind. It seemed to feed on their advanced technology, growing stronger with each weapon they fired at it. The more ordered and sophisticated their attacks, the more icily the entity absorbed them. "What are the casualty reports from the outer colonies?" Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer.
"Oh!"
"Complete evacuation of the Theta Prime system was unsuccessful, sir?" The Devourer reached them before our transport ships could finish the rescue operation. "We estimate 3 billion civilians were lost." The numbers felt impossible to comprehend. 3 billion lives, snuffed out in an instant. Veltar had commanded fleets through dozens of conflicts over his long career, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Devourer was not just another enemy, it was the end of everything they had built, everything they had achieved, everything they were, deep within the Collective's last stronghold. Chief Scientist Mordock worked frantically at his quantum sensor array. His laboratory was a maze of glowing crystals and humming machinery, all focused on one desperate task: finding some weakness in the approaching entity, some way to stop the unstoppable. Mordock's 6 arms moved with practiced efficiency across the control panels, analyzing data from 1,000 different sensors scattered across what remained of their territory. The readings were always the same. The Devourer consumed everything it touched, leaving behind only empty space that seemed to hurt the eyes when observed directly. But today, something was different. His long-range sensors had picked up unusual signals from a distant system far beyond the reach of the Devourer's current path. The signals were chaotic, unorganized, primitive by Collective standards. Most scientists would have dismissed them as background noise from some barely civilized world. Mordock studied the data more carefully. The signals came from the 3rd planet in a small yellow star system, a world the inhabitants called Earth. The transmissions were a jumbled mess of different frequencies, languages, and technologies. Music mixed with scientific data. Military communications overlapped with entertainment broadcasts, and mathematical equations were transmitted alongside emotional poetry. "Fascinating," Mordock whispered to himself. "They think in chaos." Collective had always prided itself on order and harmony. Their cities followed perfect mathematical patterns. Their fleets moved in precise formations, and their thoughts aligned in beautiful synchronization. It was this order that had allowed them to build such an advanced civilization. But perhaps order was not always strength. Perhaps the very thing that made them great also made them vulnerable to the Devourer. The entities seemed to consume ordered systems with ease, But what would happen if it encountered something truly chaotic? Outside, the last of the collective's defensive fleets prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. The Devourer's shadow was already visible on the horizon, a dark mass that seemed to pull light itself into its hungry depths. Soon, it would reach their final stronghold, and everything they had ever been would cease to exist. As the Devourer's shadow fell across their final world, the Zephyrians made a desperate choice. They sent their last transmission into the void. Not seeking salvation, they had long given up hope of that, but hoping that someone, somewhere, would remember that they had existed. The message traveled through space toward that distant blue planet, carrying with it the final words of a dying civilization. They had no way of knowing that their message would be received by beings who thought in the very chaos that might be their salvation. The massive screens in the soul space center flickered with alien symbols that seemed to dance across the display like living things. Dr. Kim Guan pushed his glasses up his nose and leaned closer to the transmission, his heart racing as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The mathematical equations were beautiful in their complexity, but underneath their elegance lay something that made his blood run cold. Cold, pure desperation. "Sir, we have confirmed the signal's origin point," reported Lieutenant Park Hyun from his position at the communications console. The young officer's voice was steady, but Ji-won could see the excitement in his eyes. This was humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and it was happening on his watch. The transmission came from the Andromeda sector, approximately 2.5 million light-years from Earth. Director Lee Min-ho walked slowly around the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the alien message from every angle. The older man had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, he felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. "What exactly are they asking for, Dr. Kim?" Gi-won ran his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit he had developed during his years of research. "They are requesting immediate assistance against something they call the Devourer. From what I can understand of their mathematics, this entity has been systematically destroying their civilization. They have already lost most of their star systems." As the room fell silent, except for the quiet humming of the computers. Everyone present understood the implications. An alien civilization that could send messages across galactic distances was asking Earth for help. The same Earth that had only recently managed to establish a permanent base on Mars. "Our fastest ships would take centuries to reach them," Director Lee said finally. "Even if we launched every vessel we have, we would arrive long after their civilization has been destroyed. What could we possibly do to help them?" Ji-won stared at the alien transmission, his mind racing as he analyzed the patterns hidden within. The mathematical formulas, the Zephyrians, as they called themselves, had included detailed information about their failed attempts to stop the Devourer. Every strategy they had tried followed perfect mathematical principles. Their weapons were precisely calibrated, their tactics were mathematically optimal. Their fleet movements followed classical physics equations. "Director, look at their approach patterns," Ji-won said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with understanding. "They are thinking in perfect mathematical harmony. Every solution they have tried follows classical physics. Their civilization appears to be built on order and predictability." Lieutenant Park looked up from his console. "Is that not how advanced civilization should operate, with logic and mathematical precision?" "That is exactly the problem," Gi-won replied, his voice growing excited. "Look at the data they provided about the Devourer. It does not simply destroy things randomly. It follows patterns, consumes order. It feeds on predictability. If the answer is not logical?" The room fell silent again, as everyone tried to process this idea. Earth's technology was primitive compared to what the desperate aliens possessed. Their ships were slower, their weapons were weaker, and their understanding of physics was limited. But Ji-won had noticed something in their transmission that gave him hope. "The Devourer appears to be confused by chaos," he continued. "There are several instances where the entity hesitated when faced with unexpected variables, random system failures, communication errors, even navigation. Mistakes seemed to slow it down." Director Lee raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting that our primitive technology might actually be an advantage? Not our technology, Guan said, shaking his head. Our thinking. Humans do not approach problems the way these aliens do. We are unpredictable. We make mistakes that somehow turn into solutions. We create art that makes no mathematical sense but touches the soul. We build machines that should not work but do anyway. The idea was so strange that it took several minutes for everyone to fully understand what Guan was proposing. Instead of sending their most advanced technology, they should send their most unconventional minds. People who thought outside the rules, who found creative solutions to impossible problems, who thrived in chaos rather than order. We need to send our best chaos theorists, Guan declared, his voice filled with conviction. Engineers who build things that should not work. Artists who create impossible beauty. Soldiers who win unwinnable battles. People who do not think like the aliens do. It was crazy, perhaps even dangerous, but it might be their only chance to help. Who do you have in mind? Dr. Choi Yuna Jiwon said immediately. She is our best mathematician, but she specializes in chaos theory and nonlinear systems. She finds patterns and randomness that others cannot see. Captain Nam Seok, Lieutenant Park added. He is the engineer who built the Mars colony's life support system, using spare parts and creative solutions when the original equipment failed, and Major Han Jun Juan continued. He is the tactical specialist who developed our asymmetric warfare protocols. He wins war games by breaking the rules and doing what the enemy does not expect. Within weeks, Earth's most unconventional minds were gathered together for humanity's first interstellar mission. They would travel to the stars, not with the most advanced technology, but with the most unpredictable thinking. It was a desperate gamble, but it was also humanity's greatest strength. The human ship Tempest drifted slowly toward the Zephyrian stronghold, its hull patched with metal plates of different colors and textures. Day marks crossed the surface, like scars, and several sections appeared to be held together with what looked like industrial tape. Compared to the sleek, crystalline vessels of the collective that floated nearby like works of art, the human ship resembled a child's toy built from scrap metal. Commander Veltar stood on the docking platform, his four golden eyes focused on the strange vessel as it approached. The ship's docking procedure was unlike anything he had ever seen. Instead of the smooth, calculated approach that Zephyrian pilots used, the human ship seemed to wobble and adjust its course multiple times, as if the pilot was making decisions on the spot. "These are our saviors?" Veltar asked quietly, speaking to Lieutenant Kirazan, who stood beside him. His voice carried a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. The docking bay doors opened with a hiss. The humans began to disembark. Veltar watched in amazement as they immediately started arguing among themselves. Their voices rose and fell in passionate debate, and they gestured wildly with their hands as they spoke. Some pointed at the Zephyrian ships, others at their own vessel, and still others at the star charts displayed on nearby screens. "Sir, should we intervene?" Kirazan asked, unsure whether the humans were having a friendly discussion or preparing for combat. "No," Veltar replied. "Let us observe them first." The humans seemed to operate in barely controlled chaos. They moved in different directions, each following their own purpose, yet somehow they all seemed to know what the others were doing. It was like watching a complicated dance where no one knew the steps, but everyone moved in perfect harmony anyway. Dr. Choi. Yuna stepped forward from the group, her black hair tied back in a simple ponytail and her clothes wrinkled from the long journey. She approached Commander Veltar with a warm smile that immediately put him at ease despite his concerns. "Commander Veltar, I presume?" she said, her voice carrying a confidence that seemed out of place given her primitive appearance. "I am Dr. Choi Yuna, and we are here to help. But first, we need to understand your enemy differently than you have been approaching it." Veltar studied the human woman carefully. She was smaller than most Zephyrians, with only 2 eyes instead of 4, and her skin was a strange pink color that seemed to change shade depending on the light. Yet there was something in her manner that commanded respect. "Dr. Choi, we have provided you with all our data about the Devourer," Veltar said formally. Our best scientists have analyzed the entity for cycles. What more could you possibly learn? Yuna's smile widened. That is exactly the problem. You have been thinking about this like scientists. We need to think about it like humans. Following days, the humans spread throughout the Zephyrian stronghold like a controlled infection. They studied the alien data, but not in the way the Zephyrians expected. Instead of sitting quietly at computer terminals, they moved around constantly, talking to each other, drawing pictures on walls, even acting out scenarios with their bodies. Engineer Namsiok caused particular confusion among the alien scientists. He wandered through their laboratories, picking up spare parts and discarded equipment that the Zephyrians had considered useless. Within hours, he had built a device that the aliens could not identify, but that seemed to work perfectly for purposes they could not understand. "What is this machine supposed to do?" asked Dr. Mordok. The collective's chief scientist Nam Coc shrugged as he connected two pieces of equipment that had never been designed to work together. "I am not sure yet, but it feels right. The concept of building something based on feeling, rather than mathematical calculations, was so foreign to the Zephyrians that many of them began to question whether the humans were truly intelligent or simply very lucky primitives. Major Han Jun spent his time with the collective's military commanders, teaching them concepts that went against everything they had learned about warfare. Instead of showing them how to create perfect battle formations, he taught them how to break their own patterns and think like their enemies. "Your fleets move in beautiful formations," he explained to a group of alien officers. "But beauty is predictable. The Devourer has learned to expect your beauty. What if you moved in ugly patterns instead?" The alien officers looked at each other in confusion. The idea of deliberately creating something ugly was as foreign to them as the idea of deliberately making mistakes. After several days of observation, Dr. Yuna called a meeting of the collective's ruling council. She stood before the assembled aliens, her small human form dwarfed by their impressive crystalline chairs. But her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Your entity is not random," she explained, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. "It is following mathematical perfection. It consumes ordered civilizations because that is all it knows how to process. Your weapons are too perfect, your tactics are too logical, your thinking is too organized." The alien's universal translator struggled with some of the concepts she was presenting, creating awkward pauses in her speech. "You wish to confuse it?" asked one of the council members, his voice expressing the same bewilderment that Veltar felt. "Not confuse," Captain Nam interjected from where he stood, welding two incompatible technologies together, sparks flying around his hands. "We want to overwhelm it with beautiful chaos." The great concert hall of the Zephyrian stronghold had never heard sounds like these before. For 3,000 years, the crystalline chamber had resonated with perfect harmonies. Mathematical melodies that followed precise frequencies and created music that was as beautiful as it was predictable. Now, under the guidance of composer Lim Sora, the alien musicians were learning to break every rule they had ever known. "No, no, no," Sora said gently, waving her hands to stop the Zephyrian orchestra. "You are still thinking too much. Music is not a mathematical equation. It is emotion made into sound." The lead Zephyrian musician, whose name translated roughly to perfect tone, looked confused. His 4 vocal cords were capable of producing sounds that humans could never make, harmonies that existed in quantum frequencies beyond normal hearing. "But composer Sora, if we do not follow the mathematical relationships between notes, how can we create beauty?" Sora smiled and sat down at the strange alien instrument that resembled a cross between a piano and a harp made of light. "Beauty is not always perfect. Sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones that surprise us." She began to play, her fingers dancing across the light strings in a pattern that made no mathematical sense. The melody wandered, jumped unexpectedly, and seemed to change its mind about where it wanted to go. Yet somehow, it was hauntingly beautiful. "This feels wrong," complained another Zephyrian musician, his voice trembling as he tried to follow. Sora's lead. His training told him that music should follow patterns, that harmony meant mathematical relationships between frequencies, that beauty came from order. That is exactly the point, Sora replied, conducting the alien orchestra in what humans call jazz improvisation. We want it to feel wrong to you. We want it to feel wrong to the Devourer, too. The alien musicians struggled with the concept, but slowly they began to understand. Their perfect voices, trained to sing in quantum frequencies that could influence the fabric of space itself, now produced deliberate imperfection. The sounds they created were chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. Meanwhile, in the military command center, Major Han Jun was having his own challenges with the collective's fleet commanders. The aliens sat in their floating chairs, their multiple eyes focused on the tactical displays that showed their ships in perfect formation. For millennia, their fleets had moved like clockwork, each vessel knowing exactly where it should be at every moment. Forget everything you know about formation flying, Han Jun told them, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had won impossible battles. Your ships are too predictable. The Devourer has learned to expect your patterns, Commander. Valtar leaned forward in his chair. But Major, our formations are mathematically perfect. They provide maximum coverage with minimum vulnerability. How can we improve on perfection? By making mistakes, Han Jun replied, causing several aliens to make sounds that their translators could not interpret. By being unpredictable, by dancing instead of marching. The concept was so foreign to the Zephyrians that many of them began to question whether the human was mentally stable. Ships that had moved in perfect formation for millennia now had to learn to dance unpredictably through space, breaking their own patterns and creating new ones on the spot, in the deepest laboratories of the stronghold. Dr. Yuna worked alongside the alien scientists to modify their quantum transmitters. The equipment was far more advanced than anything on Earth, but Yuna approached it with the same creative thinking that had made her famous among human mathematicians. We are not trying to destroy the Devourer, she explained to Dr. Mordok, as they worked together on the massive transmitter array. We are trying to show it a way home. Mordok's 6 arms moved carefully over the controls, making adjustments according to Yuna's specifications. I do not understand, Dr. Yuna. How can we send something home when we do not know where it came from? Yuna smiled as she watched the patterns on her screen. The humans had spent days analyzing the Devourer's behavior, not just its actions, but its reactions to different stimuli. They had discovered something that the ordered minds of the Zephyrians had missed. The entity is not evil, she explained. It is lost. We believe it is a multidimensional being that has been trapped in regular space-time. It consumes ordered realities because it is desperately trying to find its way back to its chaotic home dimension.
Oh.
The concept was revolutionary. The Zephyrians had always assumed that the Devourer was a weapon or a predator, something that destroyed, because destruction was its purpose. But the humans saw it differently. They saw a creature that was homesick, consuming entire civilizations, not out of malice, but out of desperate confusion. Think of it like this, Yuna continued, her hands moving as she spoke. Imagine you were trapped in a world where everything was the opposite of what you knew. You would try everything you could think of to get home, even if it meant destroying things you did not understand. The alien scientists began to see the pattern. The Devourer's path of destruction was not random, it was the path of a lost creature, trying to find familiar chaos in a universe of order. We create a storm, Yuna announced to the assembled scientists, her voice filled with conviction. Not of destruction, but of liberation. We show it the way home. As the Devourer approached their last stronghold, its massive form casting shadows across entire star systems, the combined human-alien fleet prepared for the most audacious rescue mission in galactic history. They were not preparing for war. They were preparing for the greatest act of compassion the universe had ever seen. The final battle began not with the roar of weapons or the flash of explosions, but with the most beautiful and terrible symphony the universe had ever heard. Across the void of space, the Zephyrian fleet spread out in patterns that would have horrified their ancestors. Ships that had moved in perfect mathematical formations for 3 millennia now danced through the darkness, like leaves caught in an impossible wind. From the bridge of the Tempest, Captain Namesuk watched the alien vessels with satisfaction. Each ship broadcast a different signal into the void human poetry, mixed with alien quantum equations that had been deliberately scrambled. Jazz music overlapping with mathematical formulas that made no sense, and the voices of children singing. Lullabies beside the sound of Zephyrian, war chants played backwards. The devourer approached through the starfield like a living shadow, its massive form stretching across space in ways that hurt to look at directly. Its dark tendrils reached out ahead of it, hungry and searching, ready to consume another ordered civilization. But as the chaotic symphony reached its ears, something unexpected happened. The entity hesitated, for the first time since the Zephyrians had encountered it. The devourer stopped its relentless advance. Its consuming tendrils wavered in confusion, pulling back slightly as if trying to understand what it was experiencing. The creature had consumed dozens of civilizations, each one following predictable patterns of order and logic. This was something entirely new. "It is working," whispered Commander Veltar from his command ship, his four eyes wide with amazement. The creature is actually confused. On the Tempest's bridge, Dr. Yuna watched her instruments carefully. The readings showed the devourer's energy patterns shifting and changing. It's no longer following the steady rhythm of consumption that had marked its approach to every other world. "Now," shouted Captain Nam from the command chair. The humans activated their dimensional storm generator, a device that existed only because human engineers refused to accept that something was impossible. Built from spare parts, alien technology, and pure, stubborn determination, it should not have worked according to any known laws of physics. But it did work, because sometimes the universe rewards those who refuse to give up. Space-time began to twist around the devourer like water swirling down a drain. Reality itself started to dance, bending and flowing in patterns that made the stars flicker and the void shimmer with impossible colors. The fabric of existence rippled outward from the device, creating waves of pure chaos that washed over the entity. Major Han Jun led the tactical assault from his fighter squadron. This was unlike any battle he had ever fought. His pilots flew in patterns that made no strategic sense, weaving through space in formations that would have failed every military textbook ever written. They created beautiful chaos across the battlefield, their ships dancing through the twisted space-time like performers in some cosmic ballet. The devourer, overwhelmed by the unprecedented disorder surrounding it, began to change. Its massive form pulsed with new energy, and the dark tendrils that had consumed entire star systems now reached out, not with hunger, but with something that looked almost like hope. "It is remembering," whispered Dr. Yuna, her voice filled with wonder as she watched the entity's behavior transform. "It is remembering home." The space-time vortex opened like a flower of pure possibility, revealing glimpses of a dimension where chaos was not destruction, but creation, where disorder was not confusion, but freedom. Through the dimensional rift, strange lights danced, and impossible colors swirled, creating patterns that changed even as they were observed. The devourer is no longer a cosmic predator, but revealed as a lost traveler, reached toward the dimensional rift with what could only be described as joy. Its entire form began to glow with an inner light that had been hidden beneath cycles of desperate hunger and confusion. For a moment, the entity turned toward the combined human-alien fleet, and those who looked upon it saw not a monster, but a creature that had been homesick for longer than their civilizations had existed. It pulsed once with what might have been gratitude, then began to move toward the portal. As the devourer approached the dimensional rift, its form began to change. The dark tendrils that had consumed planets became streams of light that danced. With the chaotic energies of the portal, the massive shadow that had blotted out stars transformed into something beautiful and strange. A being of pure possibility returning to a realm where such things belonged, in a flash of impossible light that filled the void with colors that had no names. The entity vanished through the portal. The dimensional rift closed behind it with a sound like music made of starlight, leaving only the gentle glow of normal space and the quiet hum of ship engines. The battle was over, but nobody had won because nobody had fought. Instead, they had all participated in the greatest rescue mission in galactic history, Commander. Altar approached the humans with something resembling tears in his 4 golden eyes. His voice shook with emotion as he spoke words that would be remembered for thousands of years. "We waited for a miracle," he said, his voice carrying across the communication channels to every ship in the fleet. But Earth brought something better: hope. The Zephyrian Collective established the first Terran Alien Council, recognizing that sometimes the most primitive species offer the most advanced solutions. Earth became known throughout the galaxy not as conquerors, but as the Stormbringers, who bring hope to the impossible, and in the dimensions beyond normal space. A creature that had been lost for eons finally danced again in the beautiful chaos of home.